Hi, I'm Rahel Philipose and you are listening to Three Things, the Indian Express News Show. In this episode, we talk about wreckage of space objects like rockets or satellites falling on Earth. We also talk about a report by the World Health Organization on worldwide tobacco control measures. But first, we talk about the communal clashes in Haryana. On Monday, violent clashes broke out in Haryana's Nuh district during a yatra organized by the Bajrang Dal and the Vishwa Hindu Parishad. Soon after, the violence spread to its neighbouring district Gurgaon, resulting in 6 fatalities and leaving more than 50 people injured. Now, it's important to note that the rally in question, the Braj Mandal Jal Abhishek Yatra, has been taking place for the past 3 years. And it was started by the Vishwa Hindu Parishad to quote-unquote revive the holy Hindu site in the Muslim-majority district of Nuh. This year's yatra was supposed to proceed as planned, but the region had already been experiencing tensions. While commenting on the situation, the Deputy Chief Minister Dushyant Chautala said during the Indian Express's idea exchange that the violence started because of one rumour on social media.
And I would request everybody to keep their calm because there was just one rumour which led to all this. And I think
And Haryana Chief Minister Manohar Lal Khattar termed this violence as a conspiracy of a few people.
घटना इस प्रकार हुई कि वहां समाज की एक यात्रा जो हर वर्ष निकलती थी उसका आयोजन किया जा रहा था और कुछ लोगों ने एक षड्यंत्र रच करके उस यात्रा पर आक्रमण करना शुरू किया और आक्रमण
When we spoke to the Indian Express's Aiswarya Raj, who covered the clashes for the paper, she told us that she had initially gone to visit the district not to cover the rally, but after she came across a video by the self-proclaimed cow vigilante Mohit Yadav, who is better known as Monu Manesar.
I went there because Monu Manesar had posted a video saying that he would be there, and he has been absconding from police for a long time, since February, when the Junaid and Nasir case happened.
Here, Aishwarya is talking about the Bhiwani murders that took place earlier this year, where 2 men were allegedly killed by cow vigilantes on suspicion of cow smuggling.
So these 2 people were from Rajasthan's Bharatpur. They were killed and allegedly burnt alive and found in Bhiwani. So it is alleged that cow vigilantes or Gau Rakshaks were behind this. 3 people have been arrested in the case. And Monu Manesar's name has been going around, and Rajasthan police has also given his name in the FIR. He is one of the accused. And Mewat is a very charged area when it comes to VHP or Bajrang Dal. And there have been a lot of instances of violence because cow vigilantes chase people, alleged cow smugglers, and such crimes have been happening. And since February especially, from when I went there, when I talked to the locals, I understood that people were really riled up or people were really angry about what was happening. And when they also came across this video that Monu was coming, even they got charged.
Eventually, though, Monu did not turn up for the rally. But the clashes that have been taking place since Monday have left the region tense and volatile. To know more about what has been happening in Haryana since Monday, my colleague Utsa Sarmin speaks to Aishwarya in this segment.
So Aishwarya, you were covering the rally when the violence broke out. So tell us what exactly happened during the yatra.
So the first clash happened on Monday when the rally was happening. So the rally had to happen in 3 different places, and it was actually going from one place to the other when it suddenly erupted. So there was an inaugural function, some people were speaking, and these speeches were also quite questionable. And after that, the rally was moving forward to the next point in Firozpur Chirka, which is quite far away from the first point that was in Nalhad. It was a mandir. So from Nalhad Mandir, everyone was going. We were also part of the rally because we were following them. And it was like a huge rally. Around 1,100 to 1,400 people were there. So they had 2 buses, vans, SUVs, a lot of cars. And so around 4 kilometer away from the temple, the rally stopped. And everyone was quite confused what was happening, and people started running. Bajrang Dal and VHP people were running from their vehicles. They were just leaving their vehicles and running. So we got out and we asked, and when we looked quite far away, some 200, 500 meters away, there was a huge mob. A lot of people had gathered there. And later, people started taking up arms, swords, axes, sticks. So what police have said so far is both the locals as well as the Bajrang Dal and VHP people had arms, including guns. So we were stuck there for a while and we could not even reverse the vehicle. That's how bad it was. And at one point, people started burning vehicles. Vandalism, arson, all these things were happening. So as a reaction, it was happening on this side as well. So we could see Bajrang Dal and VHP people stopping locals or stopping vehicles, asking them to get down and burning their vehicles, vandalizing them.
And then the clashes spread to Gurgaon, right? So tell us what all you have seen happening in Gurgaon over the past 2 days.
So on Monday night, it started at 12 o'clock in Sector 57. A mosque was burnt. The Naib Imam was killed and another person was injured. And I was told by the police as well as eyewitnesses that around 80 people were there in the mob. And they burnt the mosque and they stabbed the Naib Imam to death. And he was declared dead on arrival at the hospital. And that is how a major outbreak of violence started in Gurgaon. And later on Tuesday, clashes were there in multiple pockets of the city. Around 200 men went to one part of the city, burnt the shops of locals. And in another part, meat shops were closed, were vandalized. So that was happening on Tuesday. And Section 144 has been imposed in different parts of Gurgaon in the whole district. Nuh has a curfew. So VHP was about to take out a Mahapanchayat, but they were stopped by the administration.
Now, Aishwarya, as you have mentioned, tensions were already simmering in the state even before the Yatra because of the Bhiwani killings and Monu Manesar's video. So despite that, do we know why the local administration allowed the Yatra to happen?
So on July 27th, almost 3 days before the Yatra, there was a meeting between all the stakeholders. The locals were there, Bajrang Dal, VHP, also Muslim organizations, where they had a meeting together with the ASP, and the permission was given for the Yatra by saying that you will not be allowed to carry weapons. Even kirpans were not allowed. So every stakeholder agreed to this, and even VHP and Bajrang Dal said they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't carry weapons. Because this Yatra has been happening for 2-3 years, even the locals did not want to disrupt it. So since they agreed to the conditions that were set by police, the Yatra was also given permission. On July 29th, 2 days later, Monu's video became viral, and that is how even locals have said that they started getting really apprehensive, because he was saying that he will be coming to Nuh, and that is an area where crimes committed allegedly by Bajrang Dal and VHP have happened. So that is how people got riled up. Nuh was on an edge when Monu said that he would be appearing for the Yatra. And when I was writing about the story, I asked the local administration, one of the officers, about if they had made any efforts to stop the Yatra, because Monu Manesar had posted. And they could also see that locals were angry at this. So I asked someone from the administration and they told me no talks were held, no one discussed about the video. So the Yatra also, they did not red flag this problem. No one did anything about it.
And can you tell us about the situation right now in places which have been affected by the violence?
So in Gurgaon, things are starting to get back to normal. And law enforcement agencies as well as the local administration were going to different places, different parts of the city, and speaking to the locals to maintain harmony, to remain calm and not spread rumors or, give in to misinformation. And in Nuh, a curfew is still on and internet services have not come back yet. And around 116 people have been arrested so far. When it comes to law and order situation, police have been able to clamp down on any other violence that have erupted. But other than that, a curfew is on and Section 144 is in place.
And next we talk about space junk. Last month, a large unidentified object was found on the shores of Western Australia. And on Monday, the Australian Space Agency announced that they had identified it as a wreckage originating from a rocket launched by ISRO, the Indian Space Research Organisation. Now, it's not unusual for remnants of rockets or satellites to fall back to Earth, but they are usually small and fragmented. However, big objects like the debris from ISRO's rocket falling out of the sky do raise concerns about the dangers of space junk. To know more about these concerns, here is Utsa again speaking to the Indian Express's Amitabh Sinha in this segment.
So Amitabh, can you first tell us what is this debris from ISRO's rocket and how did it end up on the Australian shore?
So it's from one of the rockets that ISRO used for a recent space mission. Rockets are only launch vehicles. They take the satellite to space and then after that their work is over. And then most of them actually when they fall down, they get burnt in the atmosphere due to friction. Most cases, all of it gets burnt. It's just that in this particular instance, some part of it remained unburned and most likely it fell off in the Indian Ocean near Australia and looks like it was later on swept off to the shore.
And is this something that happens often, remnants of space objects falling on Earth?
So we can't say we see it very often, but it's also not something that is completely unheard of. Space junk has fallen off on the Earth, not very frequently, but there have been plenty of instances of such things happening in the past. It's not out of ordinary. It's possible that some of the falling objects do not get burnt by friction completely and some parts, drop down to the earth. Most of the time they fall off in ocean, but sometimes also on Earth. So it has happened in the past.
And what kinds of concerns do these space junk raise? Because it sounds dangerous that large chunks of rockets are falling from the sky on Earth.
Yeah, it can. So there are international regulations in place on how to minimize such risks. So you have launches happening almost every day. You don't get these space junk falling every day. It's just once in a while that this thing happens. Also, most of the time, they land up in the sea, mainly because, 70% of the Earth's surface is sea. Also, if you look at these space launching stations, most of them are located near the shore. And there is a reason for that. Our own launching facility, for example, in Sriharikota is very close to the sea. The reason being that if anything goes wrong with the launch, the falling objects do not fall on the populated areas. They should fall in the sea. And if you see globally also, most of these launch sites are near the sea precisely to minimize these kind of risks, right? So the risk nevertheless remains. And there, as I said, there have been instances of space junk falling on land as well. Till now, thankfully, there have not been any instances of any significant damage being caused by these falling objects, at least not in terms of loss of lives or any major threat to property as well. So when they have landed on land, they mainly have landed in uninhabited areas. So, till now, nothing untoward has happened, but you rightly say this, there is a risk, no doubt.
But Amitabh, even if it falls into the water bodies, isn't that risky as well, especially for the marine lives?
It is. Thing is, we think if it falls into the sea, it's all fine. It is not. It can be a threat to marine life and also a source of pollution in some cases. In some cases, these, leftover objects contain contaminated objects. In a couple of instances, they have also carried radioactive substances and they can be a source of pollution as well. So, as I said, there are problems, there are risks involved, just that it's not an everyday phenomenon. And, the idea is to minimize it as much as possible. So it's not done deliberately. And in most cases, this does not even happen. Space junk falling happens in very few cases.
Right, and you mentioned that in such few cases, there are international guidelines put in place to address the problem of space junk. Could you tell us about those guidelines?
Yeah, so there are international guidelines on what one should be doing to minimize such incidents. So, how to make the launches, what kind of parts that there should be in the rocket. There are international guidelines on that. The other thing is that there is an overarching outer space treaty to deal with how countries would behave in space. And within that overarching framework, there are at least 3, 4, 5 different other agreements as well meant to deal with specific issues. And one of them actually is called the Convention on International Liability for Damage Caused by Space Objects. So this Convention on International Liability deals with incidents like this. It's mainly about damage caused by space objects to other space objects in space. So if there is a collision that happens, so suppose I send a satellite and that satellite goes and collides with some other space asset up in space or destroys something else, there are collisions. So those kind of things are dealt with by this International Liability Convention. But it also has provisions to deal with the kind of case that we are discussing, that if something falls on a country, what happens? And in that case, this International Liability Convention provides for a mechanism for compensation. And in this particular case, if it had caused damage in Australia, and Australia can claim damages, right? There is an international framework in place to deal with incidents like this.
And finally, we talk about a WHO report on smoking. On Monday, the World Health Organization released a report on worldwide tobacco control measures. The report assessed how different countries had implemented a set of 7 measures known as Empower measures, which were developed by the WHO 15 years ago to control tobacco use and to protect people from tobacco smoke. The Indian Express's Anonna Dutt lists these 7 measures.
So these measures include monitoring the use of tobacco, protecting people from the smoke, helping people to quit tobacco, making them aware of the dangers of tobacco, and enforcing bans on advertising of these products in every sort of media, raising tax on them so that they become more unaffordable.
And according to the report, India seems to have fared relatively well in controlling tobacco use. In fact, Bengaluru found a special mention in the report for managing to bring down smoking in public places by 27%. In this segment, Anonna joins us to talk about the findings of this report and how India deals with tobacco use. So Anonna, what was the primary focus of this report?
So this WHO report that came out on Monday, they are focusing on, measures to control and bring down smoking among people. Also reducing exposure to secondhand smoke among family members or just bystanders in certain places.
Right. And what does this report say about the impact of the WHO's Empower measures? Have they helped at all?
So in these 15 years, according to the report, 71% of the entire world's population, which is 5.6 billion people, are now protected by at least one of these measures. This has increased from just 5% in 2008. Then there are at least 4 countries such as Mauritius, Brazil, Turkey, Netherlands, which have implemented all of the measures, and everybody else is somewhere in between. And the report also mentions that 44 countries are still not protected by any of these measures.
Okay, and there's a focus on bringing down exposure to secondhand smoke. Why is this important?
So people who smoke are aware that it causes cancer, it can lead to heart disease, it can lead to diabetes and all the lifestyle issues. But what we forget is that it just does not kill the person who's smoking, but also people who are around them. So that's why this report focuses on this secondhand smoking. And if you look at the data, the latest Global Burden of Disease 2019 report, which has been quoted by this current WHO report, says that 8.7 million people die due to tobacco-related reasons. And among these 1.3 million deaths are in non-smokers who are just exposed to this secondhand smoke. The report also says around 51,000 children and adolescents die because of this secondhand smoke. And that is the reason the report is focusing on it.
Right. And according to the report, how is India faring in this regard?
So India has been appreciated in at least 2 of the categories. It has achieved the highest level, which is putting health warnings on the tobacco products and providing treatment or help for relieving tobacco dependence. So when we look at the cigarette packages in the country, 85% of the surface area, both in the front and the back, are covered in health warnings, and it also lists the number of the national quit line. So that's actually one of the best in the world. India ranks among the top 10 countries who have implemented this kind of health warning labels on tobacco products. Then, like I mentioned, the quit line. So the government has launched national helpline now on which people can quit and can call in and say that they want to quit, and the counselors actually help them through the process, reach out to them time to time to check how they are faring. So that has certainly helped in bringing down the incidence of smoking.
And Bengaluru was mentioned in the report as a success story as far as tobacco control is concerned. What did the city actually get right?
So the measures that they essentially mentioned when it comes to Bangalore, which is conducting regular enforcement drives, putting up these no smoking signs everywhere, very visibly in the public places, training the officers to actually enforce the Cigarettes and Other Tobacco Products Act. All of this is something which should be happening in every state. And it does happen in every state to a varying degree. What Bangalore did is that they made a concerted effort. And when there was a survey after all these efforts, it actually showed that smoking in public areas had gone down by 27%. And this was the reason the success story was mentioned in the report.
Okay, but is there scope to do more in India? What do the experts say?
So one of the important things that they wanted to focus on was the sale of loose cigarettes. If you see, most of the people here do not buy the entire packs. They buy a couple of cigarettes, loose cigarettes, which means they are not exposed to the health warnings or the quitline number. They also said that the provisions for creating designated smoking areas should be revised. The law is 20 years old and it needs to be revised because even the norms that do exist in the law don't get followed to the T. You would see restaurants serving food and drinks sometimes in the smoking areas, but that's not how it's supposed to be. The smoking areas should be just space where people could go smoke and come out. They are not supposed to get any service there. And the expert also spoke very highly about the government's plan to now implement these no smoking warnings on OTT content. When the initial law was brought in, this requirement for putting the warnings on cinema was because people said that, children would see their icons smoking and think of it as a cool thing to do. So they should also be aware of the health consequences. And since the children are not exposed to this message when they watch the content on OTT, this move will help in that regard.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was hosted by me, Rahel Philipose, and written and produced by Utsa, Sarmin, Shashank, Bhargava, and me, Rahel Philipose. It was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone who you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcasts or write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.